Here we're going to take a look at mixed costs and being able to divide them out, because management needs to be able to divide out a mixed cost in between its components of variable costs and fixed costs. A mixed cost has both variable and fixed cost components. Over one range, the total mixed cost may remain the same. But over another range of activity, the mixed cost may change in proportion to changes in level of activity, which is a variable cost. Here's an example. Simpson Company rents equipment at $15,000 for the first 10,000 hours that they use the equipment. After that, the company has to pay $1 for every machine hour used above the 10,000 hours. So here we have a graph showing how many machine hours across the x-axis, and those are in thousands. So the first 10,000 machine hours are $15,000. So that part of the graph is flat, which we call a fixed. When the total cost remains flat, that is a fixed cost. Then after that, after the 10,000 hours, after that we have to start paying $1 per hour. Okay? And so if we get up to 20,000 hours, okay, that's 10,000 extra hours, so 10,000 extra dollars. So if I take the 15,000 plus 10 is 25,000, and that's where we can see, okay, how much total we would have to spend for that equipment. And so this part of the line from 10,000 on up represents the dollar per hour. And since the more hours we use the equipment, the more total expense we'll have. That part is variable. Now, management needs us to be able to cut this mixed cost into its variable component and separately into the fixed component. So one of the quick and dirty ways to do that is to use the high-low method. It's basically simple. It's not super accurate, however. So if they're trying to decide something where they really need it to be accurate, they should use regression analysis, which uses statistics. And you can do that on Excel, okay, fairly easily, but it'll take a little more time than this high-low method. You've got to plug everything in, etc. So if you just want to take a pencil and a scrap of paper and in a handful of minutes you have a ballpark answer, if that's good for you as the manager, then this is the way to go here. Okay, so here is an example. We have 5 different months of activity. And here's the amount of activity, the production, the number of units, okay, each month that we had. And then here is the total cost that we actually had for those 5 months. Okay, so now we're in, say, November, and we're looking back at the last 5 months, and we want to figure out, using these 5 months that we know how many units and we know how much we spent, we want to figure out a ballpark for November. If we think we're going to do X number of units in November, how much do we think we're going to have to pay? So to be able to do that, we're going to go through some steps with this high-low method. And the first step is actually to pick out the highest. We pick out the highest and the lowest levels of activity. Now, that doesn't mean dollars. You don't see dollars, the high and low dollars. It's the high and low activity, the high and low units, okay? And so out of these 5 months, August had the most number of units. And and October had the least amount of units. So that's our high is August and our low is October. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is use this formula. We're going to figure out the variable part of these costs. Okay, and we're going to use this formula to do that. We're going to take the difference in the total cost. So here's the high cost, $61,500, and there's the low cost, $41,250. And we're going to find the difference. Okay? So the $61,500 minus the $41,250, that difference is $20,250. And that becomes our numerator for the formula. Okay? The next thing is to get the denominator. We need the difference in production. So that's going to be the 2,100 units minus the 750 units of October. That's 1,350 is the difference. And that's now going to go in the denominator. So now we have 20,250 divided by 1,350, and that's going to tell us the variable cost per unit, which turns out to be $15 per unit. Okay, so we figured out the high and low, then we figured out the variable cost per unit by using our formula. High cost minus low cost goes on the numerator. High activity minus low activity goes on the denominator. Divide that out. That's our variable cost per unit. Now, our total cost is the variable cost, the total variable cost plus the total fixed cost equals the total grand cost. Okay, so our total variable cost is the variable cost per unit that we just figured out was $15 times how many units of production. Then we need to add the total fixed cost, and that will give us the total grand cost. So for August and October, we have the total grand cost. So we already know that part, and we know the variable cost is $1,500, and we know the number of units for those 2 months as well. And so we're going to plug in everything that we know, okay? So you choose either the high or the low month. So in this case, we can either choose August, and for the total cost, I'll use $61,500, and then $15 times 2,100 of units. And then we can figure out the fixed cost. Or I can use the low, so the total cost would be $41,250 equals $15 times 750 units. And then we can figure out the fixed cost. And the fixed cost will turn out to be the same number. Doesn't matter whether we use the high or the low. We can't use any of these other months though. We have to use either the high or the low. Okay? So here we use the high. We took the high total cost and the number of units times the $15. So that gives us $15 times 2,100 units is 31,500. So now our equation says 61,500 equals 31,500 plus the fixed cost. We don't know what that is, but we're going to subtract the 31,500 from this side of the equation, and we'll subtract it again from the other side of the equation. So 61,500 minus the 31,500 is $30,000, and that's our fixed cost. So we now know that our variable cost per unit is $15 and our fixed cost is $30,000. So if I wanted for November to figure out, well, what if I had 1,900 units in November? How much would be my total cost? I would take the 15 times 1,900 units, And then I would add a fixed cost of $30,000, and that would tell me a ballpark of my total grand cost for November that I would use for like budgeting purposes or whatever. Okay? Even if we had used the low level, the October stuff, we would still come out with $30,000 for the fixed cost. All right, here is another example that we can go through. Okay, Alex Industries, here they're just showing us 3 months. The more months you have, the more accurate your answer is going to be. So this with just 3 months is going to be really not accurate. Okay, so here they switched the columns. Now the total cost is in the first column and the production number of units is in the second column. But it doesn't matter. We're going to still follow the same method. We have to choose the high and the low. So in this case, the highest amount is February, 2,500 units. And the lowest amount is January, 1,000 units. So that's what we're going to use for our high and our low. Then we have to figure out the variable cost per unit. And we have to figure out the fixed cost. So here is the variable cost. We took the high, that was February's total cost of $125,000, and subtracted January's total cost of $80,000 and got that difference. Okay, and then for the denominator, we took the high month number of units. February had 2,500 units, minus January had 1,000 units. And once we calculated that all out, we came up with $30 per unit. So that's the variable cost per unit. Now this part figures out the fixed cost. So we take, if I choose the high month, that's February, we take the total cost, $125,000, minus the variable total cost, which is $30 that we just calculated out, times February's number of units, 2,500. And if I calculate that all out, I get $50,000 is my fixed cost. I could have used the low month. So that was January. January total cost was $80,000, and I subtract out the variable cost part, which is the $30, times January's number of units, 1,000 units. And if I do that, I still end up with $50,000. Either way, you don't have to do them both ways. Pick a way, either the high or the low. Okay, but either way, you should come out with the same fixed cost. So now we know it's $30 per unit for the variable cost, $50,000 total dollars for the fixed cost. This just goes over a summary variable costs, total variable costs. Have a graph that goes up and to the right, but the per unit variable cost stays the same, has a flat line across the graph. Fixed cost, the total fixed cost stays flat, but the per unit